First I looked up and I thought, oh, what a good turnout. A lot of people came. Then I thought, wait a minute, these people have nowhere else to go. There's no other form of entertainment around. So naturally they're here. I enjoyed listening to Jeff's talk, I guess it was yesterday, when he was talking about Torah and the fact that it's uncertain, what the word means or where it comes from, and that maybe it means oracle, like a secret smoke and mirrors. So, as a person who has a fortunate or unfortunate writing habit, I can really appreciate a religion that has at its center a book, an actual book that contains, and now I am in a position to tell you, because Lynn told me, exactly 5,845 sentences in this book, 79,976 words, and 304,805 letters. This book, which contains those letters, words, and sentences, is at the center of our religion. And to me, that's a marvelous thing. Now, of course, as Jeff was saying, this is not merely a book like other books. This book contains the whole of life. So that when you read this book, you're actually reading your life encoded in this book. And conversely, when you read your life, you're actually reading the Torah. So this is, you gotta admit, this is a pretty marvelous thing. And tonight, when we study Torah and discuss it together, I hope that we can remember that point. In other words, it's easy in studying Torah to become theoretical and flying in the sky. And that's good to do, sometimes. But if it's limited to that, and only that, that's a shame. And certainly, in terms of our retreat and what we're trying to do this week, let's all be sure that when we discuss Torah and read Torah, that we're reading the Torah of our lives and seeing our lives in the text. And if we don't yet see our lives in the text, well, interpret, try to understand, grapple with the text. So the idea that at the center of our religion is a book, to me is really astonishing. And if you ever, maybe you have already done this, but you know, sometime you go to synagogue on Shabbat or some other day when they bring out the Torah, but especially on Shabbat, and sort of cross your eyes and pretend, you know, that you never saw this before, and watch as a book in an ancient form goes around the room in procession, and people sing to it and kiss it. I mean, it's an astonishing thing when you think about it. And one time all my life I've seen this, I thought nothing of it. It's just, you know, big deal. Never thought anything of it. One time, for some reason, I forgot myself completely, and it was as if I never saw this before. And I looked at it in astonishment and awe. Like, who are these people and why are they doing this? It's astonishing. I felt like I was from Mars, and I was just flabbergasted by what I was seeing. Which, of course, brings up the question, so what is this book actually saying? And what is it really about? And here's the greatest part of all. It seems to say everything and nothing at the same time. I mean, millions and millions of people, smart people, some of the smartest people that we know about, have spent whole lifetimes studying this book, and yet so far, no one has a definitive interpretation of even a single word of the 5,845 sentences of Torah. There's not a single definite interpretation of any of these words. Not a single one. And that's because the Torah is a biography of God. And God can't be definitively interpreted or understood. God, in the Torah, it seems, creates the world, and then for the rest of the Torah is engaged in a struggle with the world. God is engaged in a struggle with the world. Because the world seems to have a mind of its own, and people seem to have minds of their own. And this is a big problem for God, and God has to figure out what to do about this. So God has to practice really hard. God has to learn patience, loving kindness, justice, righteousness, all these things. God is working overtime because of the issues that arise in the Torah. So this is, what the Torah is about. It's God's story. Now, we all assume, in reading the Torah, that God has got everything figured out in advance. So that's why we have so many questions about, like, why did God do this and why did God do that? And we a lot of people, I think, with justice, second guess God in the Torah. Like, this doesn't sound right. What kind of a God would do this? A jealous God. Wow, wait a minute. When I'm jealous, that doesn't seem like such a great idea. But suppose God doesn't have everything figured out in advance. Suppose God is struggling with us, just the way that we're struggling with God. Suppose this world, this life, is God's path, God's spiritual path. Suppose we're God's spiritual path. Suppose we're the eyes and ears and mind and heart that God has to learn how to deal with. This is pretty much what our greatest theologian, Abraham Joshua Heschel, said. Pretty much. We need God and God needs us. We're in this together. It's, I think, what Jeff is saying when he says, God is the out to our in. So none of this can really be comprehended exactly in the Torah, because at the center of the Torah is this essentially unnameable, unspeakable, empty fullness that we have to name because we're people, and you can't have a relationship with somebody without a name. But it's the most amazing thing that the name of God is a non-name, an unknown name. So this unknown, empty fullness is at the center of the Torah. And the high points in the whole drama of the Torah are all the moments in which human beings suddenly are floored with an encounter with this